Reading from Quintet, chapter 8. But before I start on that, I must admit that the timeline and coherency of this book is somewhat confusing, even to me. So, a little explanation before I continue reading the next chapter, which is called Recent Times. Is that the quintet happened, if you remember the chapters before, talking about Pain Solution splitting up, Iris and Katrina quitting, Robert leaving the group. This was kind of at the same time as the quintet happened, so Katrina and Iris were still helping me as my assistants in Quintet, while Pain Solution as such was splitting up. So the Quintet was not presented as Pain Solution. I think I did that as myself. Okay, here it goes. Recent times. Once I was alone again. I had a complete lack of inspiration. One part of me was sad that it had come to this. Another part of me was happy that the situation was resolved. At least, I did not have to worry about anyone else. There was no one other than myself to frustrate me. I knew what I had, what I would give, and what I would get. In some situations I found that I missed companions, mostly because some acts required at least one extra person on stage. In the administration and the practical work, I was used to being on my own anyway, so that did not make much difference. And performing solo was not new to me either, and that did not represent a big challenge. Following the splitting up of Pain Solution, I faced tough times. The financial situation was bad. I was losing M3, the Pain studio, where I had my office, all the props and costumes, a workshop, and a stage to rehearse and perform on. The debts of Pain Solution were increasing by the day, and I was not getting any gigs. Occasionally, I would get a job, but things had not been this slow for years. The worst part of this phase was the sensation of having lost not only my companions, but also my friends. In addition, I was going through a difficult period in my personal life. It came to the point where I had to find myself a job. Never in my life have I had a proper job before. I've done lots of work, but never a regular job. I did not know the first thing about finding work. I have no education. I have no papers to prove that I am good at anything. Eventually, I got myself 2 separate part-time jobs. And I guess I didn't use this picture in my applications. I would not dare taking a full-time job. I was still determined to continue my work with Pain Solution. I could not quit, and I did not want to quit. There have been slow periods before, and even if they have always depressed me, at some point things change and suddenly I'm busy again. This time I realized I had to work harder to make it change. Since I began, I have always waited for the right booking agent or manager to appear. I have certainly worked with a few over the years, but never really found the right person for me. I do manage to make my own deals and contracts, but I am not very good at active selling. I normally wait for someone to request Pain Solutions performance for their event, but if the phone does not ring and the mailbox is empty, nothing happens. After Quintet, I knew I had a new arena to present my work in. Although I present these kinds of performances under my own name, it is related to the essence of Pain Solution. I wanted to explore various angles of my approach to pain. One thing being the stage shows, another the durational performances. Yes, please. I'll have both. Backstage. The next chapter is called The Discipline of Pain Control. And let me say, I am as curious as you to find out what the fuck did I say about that 17 years ago? Because I'll tell you this much, my perspective has changed, my vocabulary has increased, and my knowledge as well. Anyway, the discipline of pain control. In the West, our culture brings us up to perceive pain exclusively as a negative experience. No matter how small the injury might be, the most important action taken is to comfort the child. I'm not saying that is wrong, but in many cases, parents end up teaching their children to fear pain. If a child is bleeding, the hysteria gets even worse. I believe pain is a part of life, and if we learn how to cope with the pain, it does not have to be all that bad. There is, of course, a wide range of pain, and each given situation requires the adequate reaction. The first and most important thing about pain tolerance is the aspect of fear. Without fear, pain is a lot easier to control. If we know why we are feeling pain, that it is not connected to any fatal damage or disease, then there is no reason to be afraid. Even if the pain is caused by disease, fear will not make it any easier to deal with the sensation. On the contrary, accepting the fact and eliminating fear will make it easier to think positively and not letting the pain be an obstacle. In order to control pain, relaxing is essential. When we are afraid, we are tense, and that increases the negative sensation of pain. After limiting fear, the next thing to control is the breath. Deep and calm breaths through the nose, like the yoga breathing technique, for instance, helps to relax the body and feed the blood with oxygen. Oxygen-rich blood flows better and aids the body in carrying endorphins to the inflicted area. Endorphins are our body's natural painkiller. In many cases, this is all it takes to limit the intensity of the pain to a perfectly bearable level. When feeling pain, our natural response is to focus on the sensation, normally perceived negatively. The more we think about it, talk about it, and complain about it, the bigger it gets. All the negative focus we give to the pain increases it, and we suffer more. By shifting the focus to something else, like a part of the body that is not hurting, we bring our thoughts to something else, and in turn, we feel less pain. As a child, I used to shut my eyes and think about Christmas or any other good memory while I was at the dentist. That way, I could relax, and the session was over before I knew it. The point is to ignore the painful sensation and keep the mind busy with positive thoughts. Sometimes the pain is too strong to ignore. It is just impossible not to pay attention to it. In these cases, I try to put all my focus on the pain itself. I search for the center of the pain. I try to figure out how it spreads, where the borders of the sensation is, and how it feels right next to where it is hurting. By going into the sensation and exploring it rationally, I found that the focus is in studying the pain instead of suffering it. These are the main techniques I use to control pain. However, I have exposed myself to certain kinds of pain so frequently that my threshold of tolerance is rather high. The sensation of cuts, piercing needles through the flesh, burns, and such hardly ever bother me. Some years ago, I even tried to control the reflex of saying ouch whenever I hurt myself when unprepared. But I must admit that I gave up. I still react to unexpected pain, but I do not let it trouble me afterwards. If I can help it, that is. Oh shit, okay. A whole bunch of pages just fell on the floor, but those are the pages that I have already read, so I suppose this is like really good way to promote the book. Halfway through it, it's gonna fall apart. Yeah, well, let's get serious. This image here is, this performance is not described in the book, I don't think, as such, but this is a performance I did on March 8th, 8th of March, the International Women's Day. I started the performance with a bunch of needles in different parts of my body, including a venaflone in my penis. So at the start of the performance, I opened the venaflone so I would start bleeding from my penis. And as time proceeded, I would pull out needles one by one, very slowly. It was also a durational piece, and I was like covered in blood, and I called this piece Mens. And that's the introduction to the next chapter, which is called To Bleed or Not to Bleed. To bleed or not to bleed, that was the question. In the early stages of my exploration, my goal was to contain the blood within my body when I withdrew the needles. Sometimes I managed, and sometimes I did not. I cannot say whether it was coincidence or not. Sometimes a needle or another does not bleed. My reason for focusing on not bleeding was related to an interview with Tera Bey, Egypt's most famous fakir, supposedly, which I had read in the book A Search in Sacred Egypt by Paul Brunton. I later realized I could not learn his method of entering a cataleptic state without the proper guidance. Then, after I had read about Australian Aboriginal men who performed bloodletting rituals regularly, partly as a solidarity action towards the women, but also because they believed that bleeding was healthy and led to a long life, I adopted that belief instantly. There was no longer a question. I wanted to bleed. Statistics, independent of race, culture, and social status, show that women tend to live longer than men do. To me, it is obviously related to their menstruational cycles. I believe that bleeding is healthy. Letting out some blood from time to time will make the body produce fresh blood. Comparing the body to an engine makes it easy to understand. If you never change the oil in an engine, it grows thick, and after some time, it will no longer serve the purpose as a lubricant. The engine will be damaged. Changing the oil on a regular basis will keep the engine running smooth, and it will last longer. If the body has old and polluted blood running in the veins, that will eventually lead to malfunction of vital organs. Yeah. Bleed. As women bleed naturally, their bodies keep producing new blood to replace the loss. Men, on the other hand, do not bleed enough and they die an average of 7 to 10 years earlier. Cannot tell you the source for that, but I think I did some research at the time, but I may have pulled those numbers out of my ass, to be honest. Some people are frightened when they see blood. Some cannot handle it at all and faint if they see a single drop. I think the fear of blood is related to how parents react when children bleed. The child inherits their fear. Having large amounts of blood pouring out of the body can be frightening, but in fact, one has to lose a liter or more for it to be life threatening. Blood donors give half a liter once every 6 months. I believe that's within a quite safe margin. It does not take that much liquid spread out to cover a considerable surface. Blood is also a significant symbol, the very symbol of life and death. Blood is referred to in history, in religion, and in art. As an element to a stage performance it has, and will be used in various ways to create powerful images. Beautiful to one, grotesque to another. What I aim for in my performances is to display the aesthetics in the grotesque. I want to provoke my audience to react emotionally. I am not aiming to shock for the sake of it. My aim is to bleed for my own good and share my view on the beauty of bleeding voluntarily. And I hereby encourage the reader to donate blood. Not only is it a good deed that can save life, it's also good for your health.